Welcome to Formed, where each week we navigate a relevant topic or question through honest conversations. We are three pastors with three different backgrounds on staff together at Irving Bible Church in Irving, Texas. We believe we are constantly being formed in the way of Jesus for the sake of the world, and we hope this podcast helps with that. So let's jump into this week's episode of Formed. Welcome back to another week of Formed, where we get to hang out and have a conversation about, relevant topics, fun conversations. And off the top, I got to get your thoughts. Last night was the Bachelorette finale. I know you guys both watched it. You were super excited, on the edge of your seat of who would win.
We don't even know. Still, you have to hold on.
Okay, yeah,
reveal it.
I think they recorded it, so
That's
I
right.
think they'll watch it tonight.
We're going to talk about rule of life today on the podcast, and that's part of Isaac's rule of life. Is there's a particular night of the week that we all have to sit down in front of the TV to watch The Bachelorette.
This is what brings him delight.
They even introduced the new Bachelor last night. It's a big night. Big night in the Harris household. So,
oh my,
it was who Barb was wanting to be the Bachelor. So it's like, all right, we're good now. But okay, so the past 2 weeks at IBC, Barry has been back on stage, back with us coming out of sabbatical, and you've been talking about this rule of life, and you had this quote about Dallas Willard, John Ortberg, that I would love for you to set up kind of on the podcast here, and how we can, because I think there's a part of how you are growing as a person and as a leader over sabbatical that I think a lot of people listening to this, that we're all leading somebody in some capacity, whether it's our families or friends or teams at work or churches or you name it. There's some type of thing that we could be leading in.
Well, and often the most challenging person to lead is yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so that idea of self-leadership. Yeah, so a part of the sabbatical for me, we've talked about before, is just kind of do a deep dive into some of the writing of Dallas Willard, this USC philosopher, but one of the most profound writers in the spiritual life in the 20th century, I think. And so there's this little story that John Ortberg tells about an encounter with Dallas Willard. And John had gone to him and said, "Hey, Dallas, how can I help my congregation mature spiritually? I'm a pastor, and I want to take the people in my church deeper in discipleship to Jesus. How do I help my congregation grow spiritually?" And Dallas paused for a minute, as he was wont to do, and then replied, "You must arrange your days so that you are experiencing deep contentment, joy, and confidence in God." And John says to him, "I wasn't talking about me. I was talking about my congregation. Like, is there a book we can read? Is there a program we could do? Is there a prayer we could pray?" And Dallas says, "No, Brother John, I know that's what you were asking. But," he says, "the main thing that you will give your congregation, just like the main thing that you give to God, is the person that you become." And boy, that really struck me as I was thinking about my role here at IBC, my leadership, and I'm wanting our congregation to grow deeper spiritually, but the recognition that the main thing that I give to our congregation, like the main thing that I give to God, the main thing that I give to my family, and the main thing that I get from my life is the person I'm becoming. And so what really struck me, though, about that response is the little phrase, "You must arrange your days." Right? So you must, if he had just said you must have or you must experience deep contentment, joy, and confidence in God, it would almost feel like, well,
what do I do?
Right. Yeah. Like, I want that.
Sure.
Yeah.
But the point is, you must arrange your days to cultivate that sense of deep contentment, joy, and confidence in God. And so that's where this whole idea of kind of rule of life comes in, is what does it mean for us? What does it look like for us to arrange our days in order to pursue that kind of joyful confidence in God?
Yeah, God's desire for our lives, God's agenda for our lives is that we be conformed to the image of Jesus, that we become more like Jesus. So if that's true, then it's also true that he cares deeply about who we're becoming. That the greatest gift we can offer our teams at work, our family, our children, our spouse, whatever that looks like for your community, the greatest gift we can offer is our presence with God and our presence with one another and being present with ourselves. And so much of that has to do with what are those rhythms and practices, that rule of life that you live by.
Sissy, why is it so hard for us to think about leading ourselves first before leading others in that capacity?
Because right on the surface of it, it sounds selfish, doesn't it? Right? That people talk about. I do Peloton, and all the time our instructors are like, self-care is never selfish. And as funny as that is...
Do you race other people?
What's that?
Do you race other people?
A little bit.
This is a flex by Sissy. Here's a Peloton.
We have not talked about Peloton. That's a whole other episode about my...
I'm making a note of that
one. On Peloton, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right, but,
I love it.
But when you think about it, focusing on yourself in that sense, it feels selfish. I think... we've always been taught that as leaders or as a parent, whatever sphere you're looking at, that you're to focus on others, right? That you should be caring for others, and that's true. That's what we see Jesus do, and so that's what we should be doing. Paul even writes in Philippians 2 that do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility value others, not looking to your own interests, but to the interests of others. So that's true on this one side, but then what's been profoundly impactful to me is to look at the life of Jesus and to see how Jesus did care for others. And he does these things where he heals and he does these miracles where he feeds 5,000. But then what you see him do is he gets to be alone with the Father. The scriptures say that he goes to a lonely place, to the wilderness where he's alone with God, because that's how he renews himself. And Pete Scazzero has this great line where he says, you can't give what you don't possess. That if we're to offer others the love of God, we can't offer something we don't have. That if our cup with God is not full, how do we even do that for others? Right? And so I think that it's that idea that actually I am loving others best when I am receiving the love of my Father so that I can give that out.
That's good. Can you be a good leader and ignore yourself?
I don't think so.
No, I mean, I think that
self-leadership, I mean.
That, and that's right. Part of what sometimes happens, part of where even going into sabbatical, that I was feeling this sense of, you just got to white knuckle it. You just got to sort of gut it out as a leader, rather than living from that place of joyful contentment in God, living from that place of being rested and renewed. And so, if you're not doing that interior work, if you're not doing, and it's not just interior, it's also Peloton, right? It's also taking care of your body. It's sleep. I mean, we'll get into some of this in terms of what are the things to sort of reflect upon and build into your rule of life. But that I think that to have something to give, it's getting back to this idea, you can't impart what you don't possess, you can't give what you don't have. And so the importance of doing that work of self-care, doing that work of cultivating that sense of joyful contentment in God is a prerequisite to being able to have anything to give to others as a leader, as a husband, as a father, you name it.
You kind of introduced to our people here at IBC these circles or these rings of self-review, for lack of better terms, on this. Could you explain it in an audio or a podcast sense what those are?
Yeah. So first off, I think it's important because we've used the phrase now a few times, rule of life. So let me just do a little bit on kind of what that concept, where that comes from. So because I think sometimes people hear the phrase rule of life and it gets sort of translated in their minds as rules for living, right? Yeah. And it's something different than that. It's not rules that we have to live up to. It's a pattern, a rhythm that we live into. It's not something that is, I didn't abide by this and so I feel guilt, shame. It's not that. It's not a form of legalism. it is a structure, right? So the word rule comes from the Latin word regula, which is the word from which we get our word regular. It's a pattern. It's used in the ancient world for a trellis on which a vine would grow. And so it's just the idea of looking at your life and establishing some sense of a pattern to guide, right, to arrange your days. And so the way that I then undertook this reflection during sabbatical, created a document, wrote it out in my journal, and then typed it up. And so I used Dallas Wood's framework of thinking about the nature of a person and looking at biblical language to talk about the different functions of a human life. And so it begins, the innermost circle is the will, that capacity to choose, to make decisions. Sometimes biblically you get the language of heart or spirit, which really refers to the same sort of core part of who we are. And the will is remarkably important, and yet it's also very limited. That we sometimes think we can accomplish things by our own strength, our own willpower, and yet the will is made to surrender to God. And so at the core of who we are is our will, our heart, our spirit. The next ring out from that, and the rings are helpful for thinking about it, but it's not sort of the in and out. It's not, these are not parts of the self that you could sort of take apart with a scalpel. It's really thinking about the functions.
I'm picturing like an archery target.
Yeah. Well, that's the way that it's sort of visually represented. So that next circle out then is the mind, which biblically speaking, the mind is both thoughts and feelings that come from our minds. And Paul talks about being transformed by the renewing of your minds. So thoughts and feelings. The next ring out from that is your body, which includes your habits and your appetites. And so much of our lives are sort of dominated by habits that we sometimes don't really even
are aware of.
Really think about. The next circle out from that is our social context. So it's just the recognition, our social self, that we are who we are, very much based on our relationships. And then the next circle out, the outward circle, is where Dallas talks about the soul. And the soul, it seems strange to have it as the outer circle, but the soul is that capacity to integrate all the other functions of the life into one singular life. It's the connection. If you think about it as a series of rings, like this is the ring that holds the other rings together, that integrates them into one single life. And so in working on my own rule of life, I just took some time to say, what do I want to be true of each of those parts of my life? What do I want to be true of my will? And it begins from a place of surrender to God. What do I want to be true of my mind? What do I want to be true of my body? What do I want to be true of my relationships? What do I want to be true of my soul? And I just spent time with my journal kind of working through a vision for the life that I want to lead, the life that I want to live with God. And that was just a really helpful framework for me to think through this vision of the life I long for. Because I think for us to arrange our days, we must first have some sense of what it is that I'm wanting to become.
Yeah.
Right? What does the life of Christ look like in my life, in my circumstances?
I think also I'm gonna put those in the description of the podcast, because I think what has helped me when I visualize those rings or the circles is kind of just asking myself those questions, kind of like you did. So if you're listening to this and you're like, hey, I kind of want to do that self-examination, hey, this is what I want. That's why I was looking up on my phone how you worded it in your message, because I really like that. Like, what I want to be true. And that's how you, what do I want to be true about my relationships, about my will, and all of those. And then going back and looking back on those as time goes on, and like, am I really going after that?
Yeah.
Sissy, do you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would encourage anyone who hasn't listened to that sermon Sunday, to listen to that sermon. I think it was just such a great way that you explain rule of life, even sharing from your own life how God has been working in you with that. And I think the reason I found it to be so powerful is because I think so many of us are missing what a rule of life really means. It's this intentional commitment to live into what really matters, right? That idea of vision, of this is the life I want. How do I arrange my days so that I am actually experiencing that? And so often I think we live our lives and we're not living into what really matters and we're missing it, right? And so what a rule of life does, it really helps you focus on, these are the things that matter to me. Now, how do I structure my life in such a way that I'm going to experience that?
Yeah.
So I've been trying to practice the rule of life probably for 3 or 4 years, and and this is the thing with the rule of life is a lot of it is trial and error,
yes,
and a lot of it is based on season of life. What I'm doing today,
come back and revise, and
isn't what I was doing even last year. There are different ways that I'm like, well, that's not working, or that actually isn't what I should be doing, and so there isn't this one standard. What Barry's doing is not what you and I probably need to be doing entirely. And so I think that's important to note, but it's been this thing for me that has been so helpful it's almost given my life structure to say, if this is what matters to me, how do I make sure I'm experiencing that? My life is reflecting that.
And the reason that you have to, I think, begin with that sense of a vision for what I long for my life with God to look like, is that, we all, in some sense, have a rule of life, right? We all have rhythms and patterns that we follow, but they often just lack intentionality, right? That we are not reflective of them. So we have the habit of grabbing our phone first thing when we wake up in the morning and logging on and scrolling
Playing
social
Wordle.
media or going straight to email, and those are habits. That's part of a kind of rule of life, but it's completely unintentional, and we're oftentimes not aware of the way in which it's those things are forming us, right? And that just as our outward bodies are always being formed, for good or for ill, intentionally or unintentionally. Right. All the things that we do as we go through our day, how we eat, how we sleep, all those things are forming us outwardly. So too, our interior lives are constantly being formed for good or for ill, intentionally or unintentionally. And so this, what we're talking about here is about really having intentionality around who we are becoming. And it has to begin with that vision of who I long to become in my life with God. Joyful contentment in God. So it begins with a vision. And the circles were just a really helpful means for me to kind of work through who do I want to become? How am I doing in those areas? And what is it that I want to be true of these areas of my life?
Well, I was just going to say, I think that's really good talking about that. We all have habits that we're practicing. Like when I look at my life, there were habits that I'm practicing that were malforming me. Like the idea of scripture before phone, where when I pick up my phone, that does something to me before I'm reading God's word. And when I'm spending all this time on social media, that does something to me. And so one of the first things I did when I was thinking about this rule of life idea was thinking about what are the practices, habits in my life that are bringing me delight in God, and what are the practices and habits that are actually draining me of delight with God, of life with God. And as I started thinking about it, it really helped me be clearer on what are those practices and rhythms I want in my life that are going to center me on life with God more.
Yeah. It's you're going on offense. Like you are going on offense. You are setting a game plan for, I think a lot of us, are listening to this and it's like, man, I want to be a better person, a better leader, more spiritual, more closer to God and all of this, but you don't know really where to start. And that's what I like about this is, you even talked about, this vision, intention, and means, and setting this game plan for your life. What do I want to see? What do I want to be true about these things? And then how are you going to go after it? Like you got to be intentional about it. You got to have the means behind it. And so if we could detour for a second, what circle would you say is like your hardest one for you to really go after? That you set a vision for it, but then it's like hard for you to be intentional or chase after.
And part of what is helpful even in thinking about the circles is it's recognizing it's is supposed to begin from a will surrendered to God. But when we don't begin from that place, that's when those outer circles actually wind up dominating our lives, right? So my mind can dominate my will when I find myself spinning about anxious thoughts or prideful thoughts or what other people think of me thoughts, and I can get caught up and my mind is now dominating my life, or my body, my habits, my appetites. And so since you asked, I mean, that's where I think I struggle. Food for me can sometimes be a source of comfort or escape. I have to be mindful with alcohol because of the way in which that can be something that you just reach for numbing, for stress management. And so that I have to be mindful of the ways in which the habits and appetites of my body wind up dominating my life. And so it's beginning from this place of a will surrender to God. Paul says, then present your bodies as a living sacrifice. He talks about be transformed by the renewing of your mind. I mean, the circles are all right there in Romans 12, 1 and 2. I urge you, therefore, brothers and sisters, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God, and be transformed by the renewing of your mind. I urge you to offer. That's an act of the will. He's appealing to our wills. Offer, but it's not renew your minds. It's offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, and be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And the context there is brothers and sisters. So each of the circles are right there in Romans 12, 1 and 2. And so, that's a long way to get to the answer to your question. I got all of them in my game, right?
Yeah.
That I can get off track in all those areas.
Yeah, I was going to say it's hard to pick just one.
Yeah, I know.
But I would as well say, one of the indicators for me is when my will is not surrendered to God is it shows up in my body. In the sense for me of I tend to overwork because it's all up to me. And I'm trying to control the outcomes of my life rather than living surrendered to God, trusting God in those places. And so it's a lot about overwork. It's a lot about me thinking I can do anything. I can keep going. Other people can't do this. I can do this. And I believe that kind of stuff when I'm overworking, when I don't take a Sabbath, things like that. And that's not. It shows up in my body, but it really is the outcome of what's at the center of that is not living in surrender to the Lord.
That's good. Yeah, I think mine is. I could definitely talk about the body one, but just to zag to something else, I'd say the mind of. Just being an Enneagram 5-2 of just I'm just such a thinker, and then if it can feel that fear, the anxiety at times of things that it feels like my mind is like the quantum realm, or Ant-Man's just like rolling through there, and it's just that it's just like what I want to be true about my mind is not always true, and it's like how can I pursue that and do some different practices stuff. So let's shift to that, to practices, rhythms. You both have mentioned that. What are some things that you could that somebody's listening to this and saying, all right, I could implement?
Yeah. So you begin with this vision of the life that I long for, and then you have to sort of reverse engineer, right? So okay, what are the things that I need to make sure that are in place for me, the means to pursue this kind of life? And I appreciate your kind words about the sermon from Sunday. The thing that I was mindful of in real time as I was talking about means, but that could be a whole sermon series. And I was trying to do a lot in the space of a 30-minute message. And that one of the reasons I was excited about this conversation is the opportunity to really kind of press in and talk about some of the means. So I don't know, Sissy, if you want to talk about some of those things that are part of your rule of life.
So some of mine are... So I think of it in 4 buckets, and this is not original to me. This is kind of how I've seen Pete Scazzaro talk about rule of life, which can also be translated to even the Willard, the circles and the rings. But I think of it in 4 buckets of prayer, rest, work, or / activity, and then relationships. So in prayer, like one of mine is every morning, I don't keep my phone in my room. Every morning, the first thing I'm going to do is spend time with the Lord. And I'm so specific right now. I've gotten to the point of such specificity in my rule of life that I'm putting down, like, I want to do 45 minutes. That's what I can do. That's not what everybody else can do. There are people that are doing much longer with the Lord. And it just depends on where you are and what season of life. So I want to do 45 minutes of reading scripture, praying, and journaling. And that's the first thing I want to do. And some days that's really easy. And some days that's not.
Do you wake up and you're like, that's another like 40 minutes of sleep?
Well, and here's the thing, though. When I don't do that, it really affects me. And there are times where there's some days I can't do that, right? Things happen. And so today I didn't get as much time as I wanted. But if I like completely miss that time with the Lord, after a couple of days, that's going to catch up with me. And it shows in my interactions with people and what I'm thinking about. It shows up in all sorts of ways. And so it's so important to me to live in a really healthy way for me to have that time. It's become so life-giving to me. So that's one thing, because it's almost like every day I have to start from zero and remind myself of what is true, because I can get caught up in, well, what if this happens, or I'm worried about this thing, or I've got to do, this thing for whatever ministry I'm leading, and I'm concerned about that. And so bringing that all to the Lord, surrendering again every morning, something so important. So that's one of mine. In a couple other areas, like in rest, a lot of it's around exercise and eating right. And so I'm pretty intentional and very specific about what that looks like, because if I'm not specific, then it can be too broad. So, I get to the point of how much sleep I want to get, because I can stay up and watch Netflix. And in the moment, that feels harmless. And then the next day, it's not. And so I think about things like that. Sabbath, and really thinking about Friday is my Sabbath. How am I going to guard that? But also, what am I going to do specifically that's going to bring me delight? I think a lot of times people think of rule of life and it's just this bunch of rules. Yeah. And I think it's so important that we include play and fun and things that bring us joy as part of our rule of life. That every week, these are some things I'm going to be doing that are going to bring me joy. Yeah. With relationships, I'm pretty specific about, I write down specifically the people in my life, my family and my friends who I want to invest time with, whether that means weekly dinners or it means 4 times a year I want to go home to be with my parents. And I'm really beginning to value that more and more, because as they get older, the odds are we're not going to have as much time. So I really want to invest in, and I want to do that as much as I can and be intentional about, I'm going to plan those things out. So the way I have done my rule of life is I'll think about it for the upcoming year in about December, and I'll start planning out under rest. I'm putting down how many vacations I'm taking. It's not exact, but I'm at least trying to plan, okay, I'm going to take these 2 weeks somewhere in the year. And here's the kind of things I want to do on those vacations. Here's where I can plan out time to get away to be with my family or whatever it is. So I'm thinking through the upcoming year. And then every week I'm kind of going back and saying, how am I doing? Like this week I was on vacation. So you know what? Exercise wasn't great. Eating right wasn't great.
You're not waking up on vacation?
There's no Peloton. There actually was a Peloton. I shouldn't say that. There was a Peloton. I did
it's
do
vacation.
A couple walks on the beach. It's like 2-mile walks.
Okay. We have the pond over here. We can do that.
I could do that. Yeah, but it was 85 and not 108. So anyway, that's some of mine. I think what's been helpful for me is to not only have a rule of life, but then to look back and say, what's working? And if it's not working, is it because I need to adjust something in my life? Like maybe I'm not getting up to work out because I'm watching Netflix too late into the night. And that's not healthy. Or maybe whatever that practice I have is just not working for me right now, and I need to adjust that. So that's been really good as a way for me to think about, am I living into what really matters for me?
Yeah, that's good. So one of the things for me during sabbatical was that I had actually written in my journal was what I was craving as a more stable, predictable, and intentional rule of life. Because this is something that I think that there are ways in which I have had a rule of life.
Yeah.
I've assigned students to go write themselves a rule of life.
Yeah.
But I actually hadn't sat and written out a rule of life for myself in a long time. And so I was much more kind of inconsistent up and down. There were some key things that were established, but I was wanting something that was more stable, predictable, and intentional. And so that was the practice. The that I undertook with that. So one of the things that's kind of new for me, and we talked about it a little bit last week on the podcast, but this prayer of surrender at the beginning of each day. So when I wake up in the morning, before anything else, I'm kneeling by the bed and just praying a prayer of surrender. I have a little card, and it's got 4 different prayers that I kind of rotate through. I mentioned, I think we talked last week about this prayer from Richard Foster that's been really just a powerful means of engaging that surrender of the will first thing in the morning.
We put that prayer in the description last week of the podcast. So if you want to click on last week's episode, you can see that prayer right now.
Yeah. I'm not good at, and so this is part of the intentionality and the predictability, I'm not good at the extended time at home first thing in the morning because I will wind up coming up with some kind of reason, well, I need that 45 minutes extra sleep or whatever. So instead, what I've done is I've built that in actually to the beginning of my time in the office. So I get into the office before anything else is scheduled, before my workday really begins. So I'm getting in earlier so that I have that time when I'm here that includes silence, includes working through my calendar for the day. It includes journaling and this kind of practice of examine that I've talked a little bit about before in here. So that time for me actually is happening, but it's happening rather than at home. It's happening, here at the office, but it's on my calendar. It's, when
Which
people are
is
looking
really
for
good.
availability, they can see I'm not available. I've marked it off.
That's great.
During that time. And, putting kind of my rhythms of getting into the gym and exercising, sleep is a really big one, is actually just saying, I'm going to go to bed at the same time every night.
Yep.
I'm going to get up at the same time every day. I'm going to make sure that I'm getting the sleep that I need. That's spiritual, right?
Yeah.
That's part of leading ourselves. And so that's part of living into this vision of the life that we want. So, those are a few things that I think are really important just to be thinking through. We've talked a lot on the podcast about Sabbath, but that weekly rhythm that is so vitally important for me. And so, again, it's really just looking at what are the things that I need to have in my life that help me live into this vision of life with God. And when we have that vision, I think we continue to come back to it throughout our days. Because what I want, what I long for, God, what I'm asking you to help me is to live in such a way that I'm experiencing deep contentment, joy, and confidence in God.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important, like you brought up, that you do things differently than I do. And each one of us, there's no right or wrong in how to do this. It's thinking through what is going to get you there and what does that look like for you.
Yeah. I'll say, too, don't be scared to try something new also.
Right.
It's that trying stuff and shake things up. And even looking at those, I tell you, one of the things right now that I've done is, I have we all have multiple Bibles, and I have one that I love to teach out of, one that I typically read for myself. But then recently I switched it up, and I got this this version called the Immerse Bible, and it takes away. It basically just structures. It's I forgot what translation is, but it just structures like a chapter book, and has it takes the verses out, the subheadings, everything. And I've just been all in. And I'm just like, it's my nightstand book. I'm reading it every night. I'm going through Luke right now. And it just don't be afraid to shake it up.
Yeah.
Shake up some of the worship stuff that you're listening to all the time and trying something new. And
one of the things that I'm doing in this season is doing more scripture memorization.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that, can feel sort of like old school or,
So good
kids
for you,
learn memory verses but I'm actually working on trying to memorize some more lengthy passages that really are those core passages of the spiritual life so that they're sort of deeply embedded in there. And that's something that I haven't done in an intentional way in quite some time. And yet I found it to be something that's very, very meaningful, very helpful. And the way in which those words are coming back to my mind, my heart, throughout the day. Really, really helpful.
That's good.
Setting the vision, having that game plan, and then being intentional, going after it. And sometimes it's a matter of how bad do you want those what I want to be true, statements to be true. And I was just talking with Barry and Brian yesterday on like some things that I want to be true about my life. And sometimes it takes some very hard decisions and that some of us have to look back and say, do I want this to be true? And I might have to make some decisions you don't want to make. So thanks for this conversation. Really appreciate it. And as always, we have some banter at the end. It's fantasy football drafting season. The NFL season's coming up pretty soon. And are you all in a fantasy football league?
No.
Have you ever?
Yes.
Okay. Oh,
Football, that's that where they kick the ball around.
So European. I mean, that's how most of the world thinks about it. So
Barry spends 6 weeks in Italy.
And
it's like football, this soccer. Okay, so we're going to do a little fantasy draft of our own. We're going to do breakfast food. So
nice.
How it's going to work, we'll start with Sissy. We'll go down.
After we talked about like how we're working on the body part.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we're going to fantasy draft and build our best breakfast plate. So obviously Sissy will start, and then if she drafts something, we can't, it's off the board. We can't take it. And then we'll compare who has the best breakfast plate when this is done.
Okay.
I need you to know I'm pretty excited about this.
Okay, real quick clarifying thing. Do we need to have a drink a part of this? How much? I feel like we do.
That's
where I was going.
Yeah.
Okay. Drink is part of it. A drink can be drafted. All right, Sissy goes first.
All right, bacon.
Bacon off the top.
Bacon.
Okay.
I was really debating whether to go bacon first or coffee.
I knew you were.
And so I was so glad that you went bacon because I can take one of the other breakfast meats, but I got to have my black coffee. It's not breakfast without coffee.
Okay. Well, I feel like I can save my milk selection now since y'all are not going to take milk. I will take French toast.
Huh.
Yes, with powdered sugar.
Interesting first choice.
French toast. Wow. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So now it's my choice again. I will take roasted potatoes.
Huh. All right.
Wow.
French toast.
Like breakfast
potatoes.
roasted potatoes. Yeah.
That's a good choice.
Yeah. All right, Barry.
Right. So can I choose eggs in general or do I need to go egg specific?
I'll say eggs in general.
Okay,
what?
Eggs in general.
Yeah, because then Sissy was already
off the table,
angling.
Because then we could go back and forth all day about different types of eggs.
It's also true. Yeah.
I'm taking eggs.
All right, Barry has eggs and black coffee right now.
Pancakes.
Oh, okay.
Buttermilk pancakes.
Those are good.
But I take all pancakes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now it's you again.
So you took all potatoes.
I think he took potatoes.
Because I thought I had another potato option.
Yeah, you can't say hash browns. They're gone.
You don't have anything to drink yet, do you?
No, I don't. Well, I see he took all coffee. So
that's true.
I can go tea. Can I do tea?
Ew.
You take tea over orange juice?
Yeah. I don't.
Okay.
Orange juice, it's great, but it's not. I'll take tea.
You'll drink tea in the morning over orange juice?
I was going to say, if we're going to do coffee, like what kind of coffee? Is he doing drip? Is he doing...
No, he's got coffee
but he's got
in
all
general.
of it, so I'm going to do tea.
Okay.
I think my plate's looking pretty good so far.
Okay.
I'll go sausage.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
So you have sausage, eggs.
I got sausage, eggs, and coffee.
And
I think
coffee.
He does have a
winning.
good... Yeah.
I think I'm winning.
Okay, I'm going to take fruit. And
all fruit. All fruit.
We had an audible laugh from Will Jones in the room. And then I'm going to say a mimosa.
All right.
All right. Last picks here.
Oh, gosh. Pressure. Let's see. What goes well with eggs, sausage, and coffee? I think I'm like pretty much done at this point, aren't I?
Yeah.
Eggs, coffee, and sausage. Okay.
I was going to go sourdough toast, but I think you took bread and you took...
No, you can do a different bread. I mean, because she did pancakes, I did French toast.
Yeah, I think you could take bread.
I really like toast, and I'll go sourdough for my toast.
Okay. Sourdough toast.
All right. There's nothing wrong with extra carbs, so I'm going to do a bagel, but like a New York City bagel.
Okay.
Not Panera. Like a New York City bagel.
All right.
Legit.
Yeah.
So this is what we're going to do. We're going to put our breakfast plates in the description. I don't know. We might do a social thing.
So Barry, what do
about
you
it.
have?
All right. So I have eggs, sausage, black coffee, and toast.
I think
I
the
win.
complete-
I think I
Yeah,
win.
Somehow he won. How did he do that?
Despite the
on.
fact that y'all kept getting like these double picked 2 in a row, and
I
yeah,
have French toast,
Yeah.
potatoes, fruit, and mimosa.
That's not bad. I think
bad.
I lost. I think I lost.
but you have a lot of carbs.
I got a lot of
Pancakes
carbs.
and bagels. You did get bacon though. That was
Yeah, I
good.
did
that's
get bacon.
true.
I was
That-
real excited
that's
about
true.
that.
Your tea pick though was
Yeah, well, he took coffee. What else do you drink?
orange juice,
I don't drink.
milk, 2% milk, just a glass.
Oh, we could have done cereal. Nobody said cereal.
Yeah, that's true. I love cereal. Okay.
We've had an extra guest on the podcast today.
Yeah.
walking by the window.
They don't even know they're going to be on YouTube. So
They're famous.
yeah, you're famous now. All right. We'll be back next week for another week of Formed.